Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by our military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. On today's episode, we will have a fireside chat, but we're also going to have something special for today. We have the Marine Pacific Forces Band who is going to perform a little bit for us, and we have the officer in charge there who's going to get on and talk to us a little bit. But before we get into this episode, are you enjoying the podcast? And be sure to go to thelostart.podbean.com. Click on that merchandise tab, get you some merchandise, help support what we got going on here and giving our veteran voices out for all to hear. All right, with that, I have Chief Warrant Officer for Andres Navarro. Andres, how you doing today?
I can't complain, boss. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on. We do go back a little ways. Your first band, when you came in, I was the drum major there. It was pretty awesome. That was our first interaction. And to still be able to call you friend this much later, you didn't hold it all against me, and I do appreciate that.
All good, brother. All good.
Well, hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of walk us into what Memorial Day means to you, and also being in the band, what it kind of means to the band as well.
Copy that. First of all, thanks to AJ Cox for having me here. It's very hard for me to do. I know him as a Master Gunny Cox, but I believe that is a cuss word nowadays. So we're gonna keep it down to AJ. And again, thanks for having me on here in the Lost Art. I'm honored, and I am also blessed to call you friend. And once I give a little bit about myself, I'm going to mention you as well, because you're a very integral part of who I am today and how I've gotten this far by the grace of God. But I am actually born in South America, in the country of Venezuela. I'm born in 1978, and I didn't come to this country until 1991. I was about 12, 13 years old, and I migrated to Miami, Florida. So I spent a few years there, went to high school, went to college in Louisiana, came back to Florida to teach. I spent a couple of years teaching high school, and but I always had that fire within me to serve in the military. In fact, before I went to college, I auditioned, and don't hold this against me, AJ, I auditioned for the Army band as a pianist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So don't a lot of folks don't know that, and hopefully I don't get too much hate mail after that. But indeed, I auditioned for the Army. I made it in as a piano player, and the week before I was supposed to ship off to boot camp, I was informed that I got a scholarship to Grambling State University. So then I decided to go the other way. I went to school for 5 years, came back. But I always had that fire within me to serve in the military and be a musician in the military. So in 2002, an ensemble from Paris Island came down to my school. The usual recruiting tour, so on and so forth. I was teaching, and the brass quintet came down and performed for my class. And nobody in the class wanted to join except me. The band director said, "You know what? That day, this is what I'm doing. I'm joining," and I drafted my letter of resignation. And in the summer of 2004, July 19th of 2004, I raised my right hand and I went off to boot camp. And wow. It's been a blast. So almost 20 years in the making. You mentioned our history together. Indeed, my first band was MCRD San Diego, and that's when you and I met. As my drum major, you had just come off deployment with the Blue Diamond and came down. Although back then you didn't have any hair, anything at all. You were straight drill instructor style. But those were some very, very formative years for me. And AJ, the things that we went through in our first band, the leadership challenges, and how you served as that conduit, that middle section, the buffer between the shenanigans and the troops, right? So from that moment, you begin to have an impact in my life. And not the least of which is the fact that in 2008 you went to drill instructor school, and
right.
up until that point I didn't think that was possible, and that inspired me to become a drill instructor too. So only 3 years later, I too went to DI school, and I'm sure I talk about it all the time. Your last cycle was my first cycle,
That's right.
and that story that set the tone for the rest of my career as a hat man. So again, I got to thank you for that. And even after that, from the art school, from drill field, I went to Miramar. Actually, I got selected to be a warrant officer from
right.
the drill field, September 5th of 2012, and then got selected, left the DI field, the drill field about a year or so early. Went to Miramar as my first band. After that, 3 years there, went to Okinawa, 3MEF, which is one of two bands that are stationed abroad. And I'm going to come back to that as what this specific band stands for. So we have the 3 Marine Expeditionary Force Band in Okinawa, Japan. I believe you've been there before, AJ, for a year.
Yeah.
Right after Twin Palms, if I'm not mistaken. See, I got your career memorized, man.
You do. You got it better than I do.
Hey, man, I memorized that which is important in my life, and you're important, brother. So, I did a tour in 3MEF, came back to the Blue Diamond, and you and I served together again at the Blue Diamond. And I remember that 3 years there, and now I find myself here. I've been here for about 2 years, a Marine Corps Forces Pacific Band. So we have two. Out of 10 Marine Corps bands, we have 2 bands that are stationed overseas. The furthest of which, of course, is Okinawa, and then we'll have this one here in Hawaii. And no, man, I've been blessed every step of the way. God has had a very, very tight pulse on my career, and that's really who I give all the credit for everything that's happened, to include having you as a friend. So that's my career in a nutshell, brother.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing with that. So coming from South America, you come to America, you decide to join the military, and being in the band is very integral when it comes to that Memorial Day and really remembering those that have gone before and paid that ultimate sacrifice. Yes. So first off, before you get into kind of the band's perspective of things, give me your perspective from coming from another country, walking in and serving in the military. What does it mean to you personally?
What does it mean to me? That's a very loaded question, and I'm not sure we have seven hours to speak about it, so I'll try to summarize it. Okay. As an immigrant, AJ, I could have gone to any other country. I could have gone to any other, military force. It just so happens God led me, my family and I, to come to that one country in the world that's still considered the lighthouse. The city on the hill that a lot of nations look up to. So right. I couldn't fathom this. I couldn't, have programmed it any other way. But I happen to be at that country that's so influential, that leader country nowadays. Despite the internal friction, we're still that nation. So to be able to say I left Venezuela and came to the U.S. and became part of the baddest military in the world. And I'm sure every other country out there, every other nation has things to remember, they have their own version of Memorial Day. In fact, we just came back from New Zealand a few weeks ago, and for them, you have Anzac Day. Anzac stands for Army and New Zealand, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, Anzac Day. Okay. And to them, it's like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Flag Day, all pulling the same holiday, same day.
Wow.
So it's very humbling for me, because of course a lot of us think Memorial Day just signals the beginning of summer, like the end of school. Okay, that's right. A very, very superficial way to look at it. But nowadays we have a month for everything. We celebrate different things for every month, and every demographics and peoples and nationalities. I think it's fair and fitting and somewhat necessary, imperative that we pause and we remember what America's insurance policy, which is the military, has done for years. Yeah. Thank you for your service. What does that stand for? You got many folks, as we know, that have given the ultimate sacrifice, that are still serving, that have lost loved ones for serving in the military. If it were up to me, we'll have an entire Memorial Month. Spend the entire month, remembering the accolades. And of course, I'm very biased to the Marine Corps because I'm a U.S. Marine, but it's been a team effort, to include the Space Force It's a team effort and everything that takes to keep this nation secure against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I just pray that we'll never lose that. It's fitting that we celebrate. It's fitting that we remember with a respectful mood the sacrifice that has been made for us to live the life we live right now. It's not a hollow comment, but it's worth honoring as often as we can, not just one day. But that's my take on the matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic take on it, in my humble opinion. The enormity of what that ultimate sacrifice really is. And I was lucky. I didn't make that ultimate sacrifice, but I look at our history, right? The Marine Corps history, and not just Marine Corps, but our entire nation's military and that history. There's so many people that have given that ultimate sacrifice for you, for me, for everybody out there to go and pursue what it is that they want to do in this experiment called America. And
Yep.
that is what it's all about. And I thank you for coming on and giving me your kind of perspective on it. It's very humbling to hear that. You're a great American,
Yeah.
and I appreciate what you're doing. But so talk to me a little bit about the band and a military band and their role when it comes to
Yes.
Memorial Day and those types of things.
Copy that. So I'm gonna, of course, we'll start, on a broader scale and honing on Memorial. But we are the entity of the military band. Again, from all branches, I think to date stands still as one of the last vestiges of professional wind ensembles.
Right.
And we got the President's Own and all the premier bands that up there. I'm not too familiar with too many. I know the Dallas Winds, for example, in Texas, but the entity of the military band is another what I call national patrimony. It's a national treasure because we're still in existence. Even to the Marine Corps, AJ, I will tell you, music is one of the oldest occupational specialties in the military.
Yeah.
And I would say, right, I would dare to say, and of course, I'm sure you get a lot of comments on this, that before there was an infantry in the Marine Corps, there was music.
Yeah.
And that's how we recruited folks. It began, with fifes and drums. And before the advent of all this, all the host of MOSs we have in the military, music was the first one. Mainly because of music's power to influence human beings. You have, for example, I'll give you five: literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, music. Music stands as the universal language, and in my opinion, truly the greatest of the arts. Everyone may not be a literature fanatic, and maybe they may not appreciate paintings, or sculptures or architecture, but I can guarantee you, every single person is attracted to some form of music, every single place in the world. So to say that specific capability, which is a capability, an integral capability, still exists in the military, it shows you how important it is to the fabric of the human being, the human condition. So, you want to tell a story, you want to invoke emotions, you want to, manipulate people. Sometimes it's a weapon of mass instruction. You know what I'm saying? There's certain things, in my experience, only music can do. So if you're going to employ one of those just powerful weapons of influence for a day as powerful as Memorial Day, I see music and Memorial Day being copacetic. They're one and the other. The music complements, music helps honor, music helps remember, music helps respect and tell the story, I think, like no other medium can. And the fact that as military bands, and not just Memorial Day, but the Marine Corps birthday, as for the birthday ball, Veterans Day, I mean, pick a holiday. You can write music that accompanies it. And to have military bands, again, another entity that belongs to the people. You know what I mean? This is the people they pay our salaries. Let me restart my computer here, man. They pay our salaries, and we belong to the people. To me, it's just a great narrative. You can't poke too many holes in this tapestry of American narrative. And how the military band fits into all that. So I think it's great that we got a chance to commemorate Memorial Day with some music.
Yeah, very much so. So talk to us, what group is going to be performing, and kind of talk me through what we're going to be doing here.
Okay, so every Marine band is pretty much composed of the same capabilities. So the things that I'm going to mention to you now are pretty normal, pretty common in the other ensembles. But today, we're honored and blessed to provide for the Lost Art what we call a brass quintet, and we call it actually Tropic Seas. That's a call sign for it. And this is
Very
composed of
nice.
two trumpets, a French horn, a trombone, and a tuba. Is one of the small ensemble, small contingent, small weapons, what we call within the unit at large. And in honor of Memorial Day, we'll be playing 3 tunes and culminating with taps. And I just hope those who are able to catch the performance find a way to appreciate it, and not just honor Memorial Day, but understand how important music is to that, and how bands, military bands, have exerted great influence on such a integral day in the lives of all Americans.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better myself. So, hey, Andres, thanks for coming on. Thanks for kind of giving us a little snapshot of your background and kind of what Memorial Day means to you. It obviously means a lot to me that you came on to do this, and I will have to get you on the podcast to tell your story in great detail at another time. And I'm excited to hear all about that because I know a good portion of it, but I don't know all of it. I would like to know all of it. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for allowing your band to play a little bit for the Lost Art podcast. It's really cool that you're taking the time to do that, and I truly appreciate it, and I'm humbled by it. But yeah, so Memorial Day, we're going to have Marine Forces Pacific Band performing the brass quintet, and it was, say the name of it again.
Tropic Seas. Tropic Seas.
Tropic Seas is going to be performing for us 3 tunes, and then we'll also get to hear taps. So thanks again for coming on. Much appreciated.
AJ, thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And enjoy the show. As we take a moment to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, I want to give a big thank you to Chief Warrant Officer 4 Andres Navarro and Gunnery Sergeant Dave Burkby for allowing the opportunity to hear such a fine musical group from Marine Forces Pacific Band, specifically the brass quintet named Tropic Seas Brass. Your presence on the podcast is much appreciated. A big special thanks to all the musicians, trumpet players, Sergeant Miku Stone and Corporal Elise Grant. On horn, Lance Corporal Patrick Sanford. On trombone, Corporal Victor Tran. And on tuba, Sergeant Aaron Dumlau. And of course, all those that work behind the scenes to produce the high-quality video and sound. Corporal Darlin Moran, Corporal Nathan Miranda, and Lance Corporal Grayson Maine. Thank you all for what you do for the Marine Corps and for a grateful nation. At this time, we're going to hear from the podcast crew as they tell us what Memorial Day means to them. All right, so we got the podcast crew here, and we're just going to kind of go around and have all of them talk a little bit about Memorial Day. And we're going to start with Vic. So Vic, why don't you tell us a little bit about Memorial Day, what it means to you?
Memorial Day, what it means to me, I guess, is remembering so that we don't forget. Freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. And when you forget the people that paid for your freedom with the ultimate sacrifice, then we're destined to repeat history, in my opinion. So I've got three little short things that I'd like to talk about this evening. First of all, I don't know if anybody can see this. I'm wearing a shirt from the 29 Marine Corps Band 29 Palms, which is no longer with us. The band was shut down in 2011. As it was my first unit, it has a lot of fond memories for me. And a lot of good people went through that band. Second, the next thing I would like to remember is my dad. My dad died active duty in the Air Force. I was 4 years old. And it was tough. My mom never remarried. And throughout my childhood, there was often times where I'd just be looking in a junk drawer and I would find my dad's chevrons. He died as a tech sergeant, was about to pin on E6 before he died of a massive heart attack. But it was awkward, weird. Basically my childhood was cobbled together with different father figures. But I guess it turned out all right. The next person that I would like to discuss was a friend of mine that died after we came back from Iraq. His name was Staff Sergeant Greg Weitzel. He was my platoon sergeant. Before I went, we were all sergeants together, and just before we deployed, he pinned on staff sergeant. When we came back, before we deployed, we did a lot of things together. I was a squad leader. He was platoon sergeant. We were all sergeants, so we hung out a lot together. We rode motorcycles together. My wife's best friend at the time and he were dating. My wife kind of put her best friend and Greg Weitzel together, and they started dating. And then we deployed. When we came back, it was we went on almost immediately after our stand down on the combat leave. But then a couple months later, when we took leave again for the regular band summer leave, I flew to Michigan to visit my aunt. Greg was supposed to pick up my wife's best friend to go on a date, and he was notoriously on time, and for this date he was late. After about an hour with no communication, my wife's best friend saw a newscast where a motorcyclist had been killed in San Diego. Concerned, my wife called me in Michigan and said, Greg is late for Annie's date by over an hour. Can you find out if that was him? So I had to call our drum major, and I said, hey, I'm sure it's not him, but I'm just calling to make sure. And Gunnery Sergeant Charles Glimpus said, are you sitting down? And that was tough, because I wasn't sitting down. I was out in the middle of a field, out in my aunt's house. So I called my wife back and I said it was him. It was him. He was hit from behind, knocked off of his motorcycle and hit into oncoming traffic, and got ran over. So yeah, it was tough. But the toughest part was when I called my wife. She said, I can't tell her. You have to tell her. So she put her friend on the phone, and I'm the one who had to tell her. And it was awful. It was by far the hardest phone call I've ever had in my entire life. It was awful. And just listen to her scream and wail because they were getting serious. They were getting serious. And when I got off the phone, my knees fell out from underneath me and I hit the ground and I just prayed. It was awful. It was awful. But Greg, there isn't any time that goes by that we don't think about you often. I love you, brother. This one's for you. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Vic. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and move to Mark and have him talk about it a little bit.
Memorial Day for me has always been special. Growing up in Northeast Iowa, my father was a Korean War veteran, wounded twice, had a lot of friends, of course, didn't make it back. I had uncles in World War II, had family friends in Vietnam. So Memorial Day was celebrated. We always went to the cemetery every year. The American Legion or the VFW always had a color guard and the ceremony at the cemeteries. Then when I joined the Marine Corps, I was on color guards for Memorial Day ceremonies, and of course we were remembering all the World War II, World War II, Korea, Vietnam Marines. But then after Desert Storm, and of course we started adding them. We added the Beirut casualties in before that, and then once we started going into Iraq and Afghanistan pretty heavy, then of course what more and more memorial services, and so Memorial Day became even more personal. And I know we always speak about our veterans that are carrying around their demons, and unfortunately, I've lost more Marines afterwards to suicide after they come back from combat than I lost in my units in the combat, which is not a good statistic that you ever want to talk about. But I've always took my family to the Memorial Day ceremonies. When my kids were growing up, I do the same for my grandkids. As they say that someone doesn't die if you continue to speak their names. So always be speaking their names. And I think Ronald Reagan said it also about it's only one generation away from a lot of these traditions and customs courtesies and things being going out of practice. So we've got to maintain the dignity and reverence of this day by attending the ceremonies, but bringing family members, especially young people, and teaching the children about the importance of Memorial Day and its significance, so that we can never go out of style. It's not just a barbecue weekend. It's there's there's a lot of cemeteries filled with veterans that have perished in combat, and so we always want to remember them. And for those veterans that are still fighting their demons for the time that they spent in combat, please reach out. Don't be one of those statistics. Don't have your name spoken at a Memorial Day service because you lost to your demons. Please reach out. And God bless all those military that did perish. And as General Patton said, we shouldn't grieve them. We should thank God that such men and women lived. So God bless all who have given the ultimate sacrifice.
That's very good, Mark. I appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and go over to Aaron real quick, have him talk a little bit about it.
So much like Mark, grew up in a family, long line of service members, mostly Marines, with my grandfather and his brothers. As y'all have listened to my veteran story, so the first, I'm going to mention three of them. So the first one I'm going to mention is, talking about family, is my Uncle Raymond that was killed in Vietnam, August 27th of 1967. Mark also mentioned that you speak their names, you don't forget them, you always remember them. And I can remember growing up as a kid that Uncle Raymond was always talked about, always. And I wasn't born until 1980, and everybody talked about him coming up through family reunions, family members, so on and so forth. So Mark was spot on. You talk about them, you remember them. That's what it's all about. Vic remembers his friend every day. So, that's what Memorial Day is all about. Just remembering, speaking their name, discussing them, having conversations about them, and just, again, carrying that tradition on, not to just carry it on, but to actually remember the good times about them. And which kind of leads me into my second, which was actually a Marine of mine, Corporal William G. Taylor, was killed in combat in Fallujah on November 30th of 2005. He was one of my Marines at 8th and I. He and I had to go back, and I apologize a little bit here, but I had to go back and look at some stuff, kind of jog my memory a little bit. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. No problem. I was just recently, actually yesterday, as I was driving my kids up to the lake, and they were going to go swimming in the lake, and we get there, and of course it's completely crowded. There's people everywhere. Of course, everybody's drinking, everybody's having a good time, everybody's boating and swimming and doing all the things that most people relate to being what Memorial Weekend is, that kind of kickoff to what summer is. And so on the way home, I took the opportunity to talk to my kids about it and explain the importance of what this weekend actually is for. What is Memorial Day? And I had that conversation with them. And today I kind of quizzed them in front of my wife and said, "Hey, why don't you tell your mom what we talked about yesterday about Memorial Day?" And they were able to kind of talk about it, in very simple terms, but they were able to get across what the meaning was, which was fantastic. So it's very important, and like you said, Mark, it's not just a barbecue weekend, and unfortunately, so many Americans see it that way. And I think us as veterans, we are able to actually look at it and see it for what it is, and I think that's a great thing. Aaron, you good now?
Yeah. My apologies. Again, we think about them and we think about the good things, and the one thing about Billy is he was affectionately known as the kid would bring a smile. The kid was older than me. I was a sergeant at 8th and I, and he came in as a PFC, worked his way up to corporal. But the kid would bring a smile to anybody's face. That one Marine that no matter what they did, they knew they screwed up, but somehow would turn it into humor. That was Billy. And again, I had to go back and look at, some of the remembrance. And since I posted my remembrance back whenever I learned that he died in combat, many, many people have got on there to remember Billy. And he was remembered by the smile that he brought to everybody's face. And unfortunately died, at a young age of 26, had a young daughter that he always spoke highly of, and I know she hasn't forgot him. Who could? That's all. I'll leave it at that for Billy. That and many people have had similar service members or especially Marines that they went way too early. But that's what it's all about. The last one I'll leave y'all with is my father-in-law. he passed away in 2014, but he served in the Navy during Vietnam. But he is a man that everybody looked up to. Everybody looked up to, and I just know that, obviously he didn't die in combat, but he died from cancer. But I'm almost willing to bet it was service related somehow. But all that to be said, just a great person and somebody we don't ever want to forget. So I'll remember those three for Memorial Day. But I appreciate y'all sticking with me.
No problem, Aaron. No problem. I think you definitely bring some good stuff out, and that's a reminder to everybody, the importance of what it really is. So thank you for sharing from deep inside your heart. We appreciate it, Aaron. Krista, we'll go ahead and go to you and have.
I think, Andrew, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
do you mind? I don't mean to cut Chris off.
No, Mike, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Aaron, don't ever apologize, man. You don't have to apologize to any of us. That's the first thing that needs to be said. Nobody has to apologize to anybody for their emotions or how you feel, but to go into what Memorial Day is to me, I was talking to one of my coworkers. He's a Army vet, and I said, hey man, I said, how do you? Because we all get them. We all get the supposed to be a good text message to you from people or people that just don't understand. They're like, "Happy Memorial Day, thanks for what you did," and it's like, okay, a lot of them I don't even respond to. I just leave it at that. My wife's like, well, that's rude. I'm like, I really can't say anything without being rude. So me responding is the most polite thing I can do. But I said to him, I said, hey, how do you feel about that? As far as, it's Memorial Day weekend, and Memorial Day is the kickoff to the summer. That's what everybody looks at it as. School's out, at least here. They got out this past Thursday in this area. And he goes, well, what do you want people to say? I said, what do you mean? What do I want people to say? And he goes, well, would you rather them not say Happy Memorial Day? And I said, well, it can be a day of happiness, but I said, you've got to stop and think about what it stands for. And he goes, I know very well what it stands for, Mike. And he said, but what do you want people to do? He said, I've talked to him about a few things, and he's talked to me about a few things. And he goes, how do you think those people would want you to act right now? He said, how would you want them to act on this weekend or this day? He said, do you want them to sit in misery and sorrow? Or he said, would you want them to remember you, but be thankful that they're still here? And I said, well, I guess I would want them to be, to remember me, but not just live in misery and live in sorrow. And he's different than I am in a sense that, for all of us, life and death is inevitable. We're all born, but we're all at some point. Death is inevitable. And in this occupation, what we chose to do, whether you're in a band or infantry or whatever, everyone on this screen I'm looking at is deployed, correct? Has gone over. So that's the big thing that, even my neighbors like, oh, you doing something good for tomorrow? I was like, no, unfortunately I have to work. But, it's just, to me, it's, it's a day of remembrance, and it's a day of, even though it hurts for people we all know and that we've all lost, stop and think about the funny things or the good things or the stuff that they did for you, or, the stuff that just, got them a call sign or a nickname, or, you know, or put a smile on your face. I grew up and when I was a kid, I was taught what Memorial Day was, but it was considered, but it's also a day to go, we go to the cemetery and we take flowers to family members' graves and that. But my dad always had extra flowers. He always had, you know, it sounds funny to say, but it was a case of beer. They used to cut the flats off and put 6 packs in it. And he'd have marigolds and geraniums and, recycled milk jugs full of water so he could plant flowers and, but we walked around and did that. We looked for graves like that to put flowers on that nobody went to. And that's something as a kid I was taught, and I always enjoyed doing it. At the time I understood what it was, but I didn't truly understand until having been in that situation. And that's something I sent all of you guys. That was either last week or this week or whatever. And Andrew knows this gentleman, Gunnery Sergeant Sean Lane. And I'm going to pull you here, Aaron. So, but that guy, he was with Calm Company, and the band being the band, we were perimeter security. So we ran all the guns, all the towers at Camp Blue Diamond. And of course, there was, I guess, what I think, Aaron, you had said it when we were talking about MPs a while back. There's, it was like the tax or whatever. Everybody had to give a couple bodies, from truck company, con company, from the head shed, stuff like that to help out. The Royal Tongan Marines were there. But, that it all came to us. And every morning, there'd come Sean walking into base ops. He'd come walking in, he goes, and I don't mean to use foul language on us. He goes, well, what do you got to bitch at me about today about my Marines? And I'm like, well, I wouldn't be bitching at you if your Marines were doing stupid crap, and he's like, what are they doing? What's going on? We'd sit there, kind of go back and forth, and he's like, I'm going to wring his neck or something like that. But he'd leave. And, I didn't know Sean before then, but I got to know him very well, just interactions there and even outside of base ops. And I would say off work, we were never off work. We were always on work, but, you'd be running up to the chow tent or something trying to get something to eat real quick, or it was, mid rats or something, go get a cup of coffee, or, the infamous chocolate pudding vat. It's like, well, they got pudding, they ain't got nothing else, but they got instant pudding, But I'd run into him, we'd sit there and talk over a nasty, terrible cup of coffee. But, and he talked to me about his son. He just, his son was little, and, his wife, and he was MSG before that. And he had gotten him off of MSG, and he was talking to me one night, and his wife was sick, and he never told me what was wrong with her. I never asked. He was marked not to deploy because of his wife. And he was going to stay back, and she told him, she said, Sean, if you do not go and something happens, you'll never be able to live with yourself. You've got to go. I'm okay. We're okay. Just go. And that's what he did. And it was July 28th that all that came to an end for him. We got hit with multiple mortar attacks, and they all landed magically right inside the Calm Company compound. And Yaphet Jones and I were on the main road, just the road just outside. It was, it was brick walls where that base, that camp was. And you could hear them cutting through those freaking trees and just hitting. And then when they all hit, the shrapnel was coming over the wall. And he and I ran in to the opening. And, I think you came in there, briefly after it happened, Andrew. I may be wrong. I think you had to come in there.
I did come in and we
Yeah.
had to go back azimuth and do all that stuff shortly
Yeah.
after that. Yeah.
But I mean, if you remember, I mean, there were trees on fire, vehicles on fire, and everything. And all I remember is turning and looking down because somebody was running towards somebody, and I looked down, and there was Sean laying there. And you know, it was like in a heartbeat. I just stopped. I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! Seriously?" And what he had just told me, not even a couple of days before that, is he was actually leaving early because his wife had to have some procedure done, and they were sending him back. And you know, Gunny Olson showed up, and medical was there, and they were already calling in a medevac, and I was trying to help. And I just remember, you know, they're like, you need to go, you need to go. And even then, I couldn't hardly do what I was supposed to be doing. You know, were grabbing fire extinguishers, trying to put fires out on Humvees and on comm equipment and everything else. And, you know, they took him out of there. And, you know, unfortunately, he never made it to the Bird to go to Alisod. He never made it. And that day has haunted me from that point on. I mean, I can still see it. I can still smell it. I can still hear it. And, you know, I've pushed it out of my mind, and it's caused me that's one of many things. It's with all of that that's caused some of my issues in me. But, you know, I always wondered for years, I always wondered about his son and his wife. And, you know, my wife knew the story, and I didn't get into details about what I'd seen with him and what had happened, and nor will I on this podcast. But and she has listened to me in therapy sessions talk about things and about that. And she was at work one night, and one of her patient's husbands he was in the Air Force or something. He wasn't in the Marine Corps, but he was in the Air Force. And he started talking, and they started talking back and forth. And she had kind of brought him up, but didn't, you know, mention him by name or anything, you know, stuff like that. Because I don't know where he was at. If he was Alisod, I don't know if he was Air Force was Alisod or not. I don't remember now. But he came walking out, and he said, "I don't mean to be rude, but I think I found his wife on social media." And she looked at it, and she didn't talk to me about any of this. And she sat on it for a couple of weeks, and she finally sent her a message, and it was Sean's wife. She reached out and said who she was and who I was, and, you know, having been there. And she was so excited just to talk to my wife. And, you know, they talked for a couple more weeks after that. And my wife finally said, she said, "Yeah, Mike said that he had talked to Sean a lot. He talked about your son, you know, about you." And Mike said that Sean said that he thought you were sick or something was wrong, but he didn't know what. And it haunted him to always wonder what was going on. And she goes, "Yeah, I have lupus." You know, and she said, "I had lupus then." And she said, "But my son's getting ready to go to boot camp in 2 weeks. And I would love for your husband I would love to talk to him. And I'd love for your husband to talk to my son." And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to talk to him before he went to boot camp. I wish I could have. Some of it was I didn't want to. And I know that sounds terrible. It may sound terrible to all of you, you know, but I did, but I didn't. And just unfortunately, the way timing worked, I didn't get a chance to. But, you know, he was in boot camp. And then one night, my wife sent me that video of him in boot camp. and they did a thing on him writing, his letter, dear Dad, it's taken 18 years. And, the hurt he had to feel doing that, but I can only imagine the pride, Sean looking down at him saying, that's my boy. That's my son. And his wife did not want their son to go in the Marine Corps. He did not. But she said she couldn't do it. She couldn't stop him because from the time he was old enough to understand what happened to his dad, that's all he said he was going to do. That's what he had to do. And unfortunately, since all of that has happened, he's graduated boot camp and all that. But it was last fall, I think my wife told me that I said, hey, have you talked to Sean Lane's wife at all lately? How's their son doing? She goes, I don't know how to tell you this, but his wife died. So now that kid is, his dad died in Iraq. His mother's now passed away, unfortunately. But he had posted a thing and said, my biggest blessing is my mother got to see me walking in my dad's footsteps. And to me, that's what Memorial Day is. I'm sorry I keep rambling. It's just.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
It's that has been the hardest. We lost Chance Phelps. He was with 11th Marines right after it was like March of 2004.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they made a movie about him saving Chance. If anybody hasn't seen it, but it's a movie about him. There was another staff sergeant. He was on General Mattis's jump team. Staff sergeant, I want to say it was like Mendoza or I can't remember, Aguilar, or I can't remember. He was Hispanic, but I don't remember. But those were all people we interacted with on a daily basis. And that day with Gunny Lane, that was rough, and it's still rough. I've spent just knowing we were going to this weekend thinking about it, thinking about him just the last time I talked to him, and the sacrifice people make, serving that most people don't even understand. And it's not even just them at that point. It's their families. It's, and that's what most people don't truly understand. And that's what, Memorial Day needs to be. It needs to be, if you could actually know somebody or meet somebody or talk to family members to truly understand.
Yeah.
That's what Memorial Day needs to be. I knew Sean well enough, and we weren't close personal friends, but we were good enough friends that we talked every day that, he would be sitting here right now being like, what the heck are you all sniffling about me for? Or saying something like, just some wise, smart aleck comment. And I remember he made a comment one morning, and Chief Warrant Officer Edmondson got a little upset about it. He goes, pull your panties out, sir. It's okay. It'll be okay. And
Well, I'm glad you said it, Mike, because that's exactly what Billy would have said. Quit crying, little bitch.
He said, pull your panties out, sir. It'll be okay. It'll be okay.
Wow.
So, but thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it. I sent you guys all the videos, so yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that my wife has kept up on it. I think I told you guys that, but she's definitely kept up with him a little bit, and there's his family and stuff. I personally have not. I don't know whether that be bad or good. I try not to think about it too much, but this is probably good for me to hear some of this from you, Mike, to be honest with you. So I appreciate you for sharing what you shared. Much appreciated. All right. Before I choke up too much, Krista, what do you got for us?
Memorial Day. Okay. as I was a young girl, I did not get to go to the cemetery. I did not know what Memorial Day was or Veterans Day or anything like that. However, we used to go over to Jasper, Alabama, and go into the cemeteries. We went what was called Third Sunday in May, or it was called Decoration Day. And we'd always go up to Nauvoo, Alabama to my grandparents, my great grandparents, and put flowers on their cemetery. And that's just what we called it, Third Sunday in May or Decoration Day. And I thought it was a Southern thing or an Alabama thing. I didn't realize it. Well, a few years ago, I guess it was 2019, I started going to Beaufort National Cemetery, living here. And I went out there and started taking some photos of the headstones out there at the National Cemetery for a website called Find a Grave. And lo and behold, I went up to the front of the Beaufort National Cemetery here, and there's a couple placards out there that tell about Beaufort National Cemetery and how the national cemeteries came about. And as I was reading them, I started doing the reading through the placards, and it talked about when Lincoln actually got information from, or got authorization from Congress to purchase the lands for the national cemeteries. And sure enough, it was actually called Decoration Day when he instituted to decorate the graves and everything. And it was on the third Sunday in May. And I was like, wow, this is where Decoration Day came from. So I was glad to know it wasn't just a Southern thing or an Alabama thing. And so I ended up spending the next few years. And of course, COVID came about. And I became really familiar with Find a Grave and started going out there a lot to the cemetery. So I have some information for you about it since I did not know. And of course, I've already been out of the Marine Corps quite a bit. I was in the Marine Corps from 1989 to 1993. And guys, being a Marine musician, even then, no one really told me, and I'm not expecting anyone to tell me. It was my job. I'm an adult at this time. That I would know what Memorial Day was, all the jobs we played, that I would know the difference between Veterans Day, Armed Forces Day. We played parades. We did all these gigs. Did you think I would know, or that someone would tell me, or I would know what Memorial Day was, Veterans Day was? I never knew. Still didn't have a clue, right? Doing these gigs, didn't know what the difference was, what they were, what they stood for, didn't take the time to find out. So I'm still not getting the gist of it. So I'm out here a few years later, Beaufort National Cemetery, start taking these photos. Well, the superintendent for Beaufort National Cemetery comes out. His name's Mr. Lewis. He's an older gentleman, wonderful man. And I'm walking around these cemeteries, starting taking these photos of all these headstones to upload them on Find a Grave. It's a virtual website, basically. I'm taking these photos, uploading them, and he comes out and he starts asking me questions, and we talk, and he explains things to me and tells me. Of course, I read the two big placards that are out there. And it's a virtual website, and I start making friends on the virtual website. And it turns out there's a guy that lives somewhere in another part of the country, and he starts sending me you can manage one of these memorials for a person who's maybe interred there. And he starts sending me some. And it turns out I'm going to teach you something about a couple things. Turns out there was and the biggest thing is that a lot of in these national cemeteries back in the 1800s, in 1865, April of 1865 is when they actually came about and got all the cemeteries in place. Lincoln got permission from Congress in July of 1862 to start purchasing the land for these cemeteries. There's a lot of unknown soldiers in all of these cemeteries, and this is what I'm going to talk about mostly a little bit. Memphis National Cemetery has the largest amount of unknown soldiers. They have 8,866 unknown soldiers in Memphis National Cemetery. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is back in then, the war had ended in April 28th, 1865. I think it was a few days before then or a few days after, Lee had surrendered to Grant. And there was a riverboat. It was actually called the USS Sultana, was making its way home. And the USS Sultana had a capacity of only 376 soldiers were supposed to be on this. And the reason this is important to me is it had a capacity of only 376, but guys, there were 2,300 soldiers on that riverboat, or on that USS Sultana. And what happened is she had 4 boilers, but 3 of them had exploded that day. It is the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history. And it's never talked about. You don't hear about it. And unfortunately, there were about 2,000 freed soldiers, Union soldiers, from the Andersonville prison. And Andersonville prison is over in Georgia. All right, we're familiar with this prison. And what happened was, in my area here in Beaufort and in the marshes of Beaufort County, a lot of those prisoners had been freed, and they were on that ship, on the USS Sultana. It was kind of like a 3-story riverboat. Well, they had been paying, they had been kind of advertising, get a soldier home from Andersonville prison. So that USS Sultana was only supposed to have 376, but it had 2,300. Well, 2,000 of them died that day. What happened was they were buried at a local cemetery right there called Fort Pinckney Cemetery. And this is what would happen. They'd bury in there. They're buried a year. Well, after the cemeteries, the national cemeteries were brought into play, a year later, they were going to reinter them back over at a Memphis National Cemetery. And that's what they did. They were reinterring a lot of these people. There were people that died at Fort Fremont down in Beaufort, or they died down in Savannah at a church. So they were buried there. They were going to bring them back up to the National Cemetery in Beaufort. Same with what happened with the USS Sultana. These gentlemen had been buried. The 2,000 soldiers had been buried at Fort Pickery down in I guess it was kind of like the South Shore of Memphis there. Well, they reinterred them. They had them all sitting out on a dock, and they wrote their names in chalk on these caskets. Well, a big rainstorm came, and it washed away all their names. So you have 2,000 soldiers who had died, and now they're unknowns. So they move them to the National Cemetery there in Memphis, and now they're unknown soldiers. So what I'm getting at is that, you know, they've fought and died for their country, and this happens every day. I mean, not so much now, because now we have dog tags. We don't write names in wooden caskets and chalk anymore. And I spent all these years, the 4 years up at Beaufort National Cemetery, and like Mark was talking about, you know, I was looking at some of these headstones, and they said World War I, World War II, Korea, and these guys were doing triple duty for our country, making it a country that we want to be proud of. And guys, you know, a total back then there was like 172. Now we're down to 164 national cemeteries. Some of them are national parks across the country. That's what Memorial Day means to me. And yes, I will break down and cry. You know, walking that cemetery for the last 4 years, and I did it all through COVID. And Mr. Lewis came out there, and he would spend not hours, but he would spend an hour or two walking through. And then on the backside, I mean, the Confederate soldiers, they have their tombstones have like a triangle across the top. They're in a separate section back by themselves. They had to put them in a different section. They weren't allowed to be up front, you know, with everyone else. And then there's another section, guys, you're not going to believe this. There's a certain section that has, believe it or not, up in Columbia, back during the late 18, it was like 1916 to 1919. We have a section. There was about 73 Puerto Rican laborers who died from the Spanish flu. They were up at Fort Jackson up here in north of Columbia, South Carolina up there. They were here. Puerto Rican laborers had come and tried to make a life for themselves here. They're buried there. So there's a story everywhere. There's someone who sacrificed for this country, who wanted to live. They all died from lobar pneumonia, you know, and they're buried there. They were there for 2 years, you know. Their deaths took place in a 2-year period. I mean, but these guys were doing triple duty. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. And it's just, now I do know the difference between Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Armed Forces Day. No one ever took the time to tell me, but I figured it out eventually on my own by walking the cemetery and spending time with Mr. Lewis. And now we have a place for Greg and Tech Sergeant Nay and Mark's dad and Raymond and Corporal Taylor and your father-in-law and Gunnery Sergeant Lane and his wife to be in a place for y'all to go back and thank them and remember them. So, and for all of us to be buried. So thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Krista. That's powerful for sure. Whew, I try to catch my breath after all this. I will say, after coming back from deployment, and Mike, you probably remember this, but there was a division ceremony memorial that they were having on the field. Mark, you might have been there. I'm not even sure about that, but General Mattis at the time came out and told everybody that was part of the ceremony, all the troops standing on line, just told us no one's to cry during the ceremony. There's time for that after. And I remember, being a drummer, standing in the back. I've played through memorial services. I've done different things. And as I'm standing there, there was a young mother with her young son. They had time to go up and see they had all the boots and the rifles and stuff lined up on the field. And they came out, and young mother knelt down next to her son. So I'm standing in the back in the formation. I'm a drummer. I'm in the back, and I'm watching this. And as the young son reached out, grabbed those dog tags, and it was one of the most heart-wrenching things that I've ever seen at that point in time. Sorry. As I think back on that, I think that that was 100% right. I don't know. But I was able to hold it together, get through the ceremony. And I will tell you, at the end of the ceremony, I cried like a little baby. And that's one of the big things I remember, as I think back to, Gunny Lane and, everything that happened, while I was deployed. Individuals didn't make it back, and that is what it's all about. And I don't know if there's a way for me to really explain to my children what the gravity of what it actually is. As you're young, you don't understand death, and for us, we've been around a little bit, so death is a part of life. And I think we've come a long way in that, as we grow older. But yeah, that was one of my biggest memories, was that actual ceremony, standing on the parade deck. The entire division was out there for that ceremony, and it was televised. It was all that stuff, which is, I'm sure, why General Mattis told us not to cry while we were out there. But it was a rough go, I will say, for me personally. But that's probably my biggest memory of Memorial Day, and any type of memorial service or anything. I want to thank you guys for coming on, just telling what it means to you guys, because I get choked up. I'm sure that as you guys think about it, you guys probably get choked up from time to time as well. But thanks for coming on, telling your side of it, and those types of things. Much appreciated. Wow. Whew. That was tough. You guys, you make it difficult, but it's okay. I appreciate you. Thanks for reminding us what Memorial Day is actually about. And hopefully those people that actually tune into the broadcast or our podcast here, get a good understanding of it. So I appreciate it. One last time, round robin, if any of you guys want to say anything before we head out here, this is your opportunity. We'll go in the same order that we were in. Vic, if there's anything you want to say, you got to hit your mute button.
Sorry. As our younger generations, our children ask us what our memories are of our military service, or our grandchildren want to ask us, these are the things that we have to tell them. The names that we carry around mean something to us, but hopefully we leave an impression upon our kids and our grandkids so that they pass on our names to their kids and their grandkids. And maybe it will inspire our progeny, our downline, to be one of the actual 1% that go out and serve their country and make their own stories. But I always tell everybody I know, it's not enough that we remember people on Memorial Day. You need to go out and ask people their stories, which is why I'm so grateful you're doing what you're doing. Because we have to remember. we have to remember. I love you all.
Very good. Thanks, Vic. Appreciate it. Mark, go ahead.
Hey, to echo what Vic said, Andrew, this podcast, how you're reaching out to veterans is spectacular, phenomenal. Keep it up. Thank God for that you're doing it. For all the veterans out there, honor the ones that gave their lives by being a great American and being the type of person that it was worth serving and sacrificing for. God bless y'all.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it going. Like Mark said, God bless those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. God bless their families that have carried on the years after, and God bless the USA.
Absolutely. And Mike, go ahead.
I don't think I can say much more than what's already been said, man. It's just, and I think we talked about it a podcast or so ago about voting and that. And that's one thing I said to somebody. I said, you realize people have died for your right. One of your rights as an American citizen is to vote. And you just refuse to do it. To me, I look at it as going on their grave, it's like, yeah, you died for nothing. And that's what, Vic, you saying that we need to educate today's youth. I just was reading an article or heard something the other day, and this isn't Memorial Day based, but there's a school district somewhere in the country, and I think it was up in Washington State, where they want to remove 9/11 from textbooks, and they don't because it's too traumatic. It's just, it's like people refusing to accept, Jewish concentration camps, or it didn't happen, or it wasn't. I'm like, what world do you people live in and you just don't get it? I mean, and that's, we all, as who we are, failed our kids, our youth, or is it just this country in general? And with this podcast, Andrew, I hope that, more people listen to it. And everybody I talk to, I tell them about it, to just, a lot of the podcasts are funny jokes, or talking about your awning or, something like that, but it's the seriousness of things like this,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it's all about. And I was iffy on coming on the podcast when you asked me to do it. And honestly, part of me didn't want to do it, but I did it. And it's to be able to sit here with all of you and see all your faces, and that's what it's all about. And I think a lot of this, and there's a lot of messages and a lot of good can come out of this podcast, Andrew. So I thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Wouldn't be the same without you, I'll tell you that. Krista, go ahead. You got anything you want to say to anybody?
Make sure you whistle past the graveyard.
Very well. Hey, to everybody here, truly, truly appreciate it. And I know not everybody has a drink right at this moment in time, but to all those that went before us, if you don't have a drink right now, don't worry, you can get it later, Pepsi, a Coke, or whatever, it doesn't matter. But to all those that gone before, paid the ultimate sacrifice, God bless you. Thank you for what you did, and everything that we live for right now. It's what we're here for. So thank you to everybody. Enjoy. Cheers. All right. With that, we're going to leave you with Marine Forces Pacific Band, and their trumpet player is going to play us Taps on the way out for this episode. We are not ending it the same way we normally do, but please enjoy Taps. Think back, really pray about our country, pray about everything that's going on, and really just think about all those that made that ultimate sacrifice and what Memorial Day actually means. Thanks for tuning in.